And this one is going to sew just slightly to the inside of the first square. Because we don't want our batting as big as our entire square. We want it slightly smaller so it doesn't get caught in our seam allowance when it comes time to stitch all these blocks together. And you can take your hoop off, flip it over, and you're going to trim any batting that hangs outside that line. You're going to trim away any batting that hangs outside that line all the way around. It is batting. Trimming away the batting all the way around. Once you have that batting trimmed all the way around, put your hoop back on, and you're going to stitch color number 3. This is a placement, and it's that trapezoid in the middle, just like we stitched in the first half. So now you have to pay attention, because whichever one you used in the first half, you now have to use the opposite in the second half. So I have gray here, but I have my light out here. Now I have to put my light here. So now I look for my skinniest strip of my light fabric, and I put it good sides up. You can see I've already taken a piece off here before, so I'm matching it up and trying to use it conservatively. And you stitch color number 4. And you can use your fingers to make sure it stays in place. Color number 5 is a placement stitch, showing you where the next strip of fabric should go, just like the first time. Your next strip of fabric is the opposite, which is going to be my dark gray in this case, is the opposite of what I used last time. So again, you put it right sides down with most of the strip going to the back of the machine. Make sure just a little bit is hanging over on the left edge, but that at least 1/2 inch is hanging over outside the square. And then stitch color number 6, which will seam those two fabrics together. If you have too much of a seam allowance, like I do, it's a little too big right there, this is your chance to come in and trim that seam allowance down to 1/4 inch. This is also a good time to come in and trim away any of the excess of the light colored fabric that went down first. And then pull that fabric back towards you, finger press it, and stitch number 7 will hold that in place. Trim away your strip straight across, about 1/2 inch away from the square that's already stitched. Don't trim right up to that line. I know it's tempting and I know that it happens, but we don't want to make that mistake. We need to leave that seam allowance there. Stitch and finish trimming over here. and you can finish trimming this light fabric. So you see how I have my 1/2 inch seam allowance? Stitch number 8 is a placement stitch, again showing you where the next strip of fabric needs to go. So lay your fabric right sides together, just a little bit hanging over here and at least 1/2 inch hanging off the back of the square, and good side down to the floor, and most of your strip out to the right. And stitch color number 9. That's Julie. She says hi. Once that's stitched, pull that fabric off to the left, finger press it really good. Press your foot down and sew. Stitch color number 10. That will hold this fabric down in place. Again, trim away any excess in the middle. Don't trim along that line. Leave yourself that 1/2 inch seam allowance. Cut kind of along the hoop edge and straight across, and that strip goes away. You've got your seam allowance hanging out the back there, and then you've just got a little bit left right in here. Anything that's inside the square can get trimmed. Anything that's outside the square doesn't get trimmed. No trimming that, okay? Then stitch color number 11. This is again is a placement line. On your screen, you'll notice that the placement lines are often done in a light color. And seam lines are using a dark color. Now you'll take one of those triangles that you cut and you put it right sides together, making sure that the points of the triangle hang outside the square, and sew color number 12. Pull the fabric back, finger press it good, and color number 13 will hold that triangle in place. You could use some blue painter's tape here to hold it in place if you wanted to. So we created a piece that looks just like our first piece, except the colors are just the opposite. And here's where we move on now. This next stitch, color number 14, is going to show you where this line is going to connect the two pieces together. So sew color number 14. Okay, so here's what I want you to look at. You can see where the needle stopped. It went to the intersection where this light fabric and this dark fabric come together. And if you look at it on the screen of my machine, you can see that my green plus is showing me the exact intersection where I want my needle to come down in. So what I'm looking at is this intersection on my fabric right there. It's the top line where the top line intersects with that diagonal line. So I'm going to place my fabric under my machine, and I'm going to make sure that my needle is coming down exactly in the stitch where that diagonal line meets that top line. And this is one time where it's okay to turn your machine by hand to see where that needle's coming down. And once you know that that needle's coming down there, pull back on this top fabric and you can see your stitching line from the previous time. You want to make sure that that stitching line is lined up with the stitching line from the one that's currently hooped. You can make sure that those two lines and even that corner match up. And then stitch color number 15. And it's only going to take a few stitches. It's just to anchor this piece a little bit for you. Now it's going to move up to the top, and we're going to do the same thing. Again, if you look at my screen, you can see where my little green plus is showing me the intersection between a previous stitching line and the diagonal line. So again, I'm going to make sure that my needle is coming down right in that intersection. And if you're not quite right, don't be afraid to move the fabric and back the needle off a little until you get it in the spot. Once it's in the right spot, go ahead and sew color number 16. And just like that, you put the two halves together. Yay! Yay! Good job. Okay, thumbs up. Okay, so now we're gonna flip that whole top piece back. We're just gonna pull that whole top piece back. And you're gonna wanna finger press that middle seam. Blue painter's tape is your friend here. There are some floppy pieces of fabric here. Some blue painter's tape on that will hold that down in place. Don't be afraid to put some blue painter's tape to pull all of that back, because color number 17 is going to come around and hold this whole square together. So once you've got it flat and you've got it taped, color number 17 can stitch. And I'm just going to keep a finger back here to make sure. And just pull it back. That's Julie again telling me what a good job I'm doing. And that's it. Now I have a completed quilt block. The last two colors are just the quilting. So you put your foot down and let it stitch. And it's going to add all your pretty quilting so that when you're done, you have all the quilting.